This is Gemara and Eruvin Daf Ches. So the learning should be as chos for Shleim v'Yidamir ben Akira men of the Lichem Chanita Chaim Sarah Shlomo Sivan Yizid Los Arbas Kanadi Basim Esrei Sarah Chaim Sarasi Yosov Mitel Yisrael Shavlei Shem Bas Navi Shavei Shechan Vadam Nitriva Tino B'Chan Reizeli Buria Bas Tovia Musha V'Soy Shachali Yisrael. Today we're going to Be'ezrat Hashem finish the 8th parak, closing in. The end is in sight. A few more weeks. Mirta Hashem. So let's get to it. On the bottom of Pizayin Amud Beis, about 7 lines from the bottom, we're in the middle of discussing the 3 things Rav Chananya ben Akavya was makel specifically for the Anshe Tveria. Says the Gemara, 6 lines to the bottom, Tanu Rabbanan. Gimel Devarim Heiter Rav Chananya ben Akavya. There were 3 things that he was makel Anshe Tveria for the people of Tveria. Number 1 was Malimai Mikzucha the Shabbos. That's what we spoke about extensively, that they could fill up the water from this platform on Shabbos. And we explained that the reason was because Tveria was the city that was already surrounded, wasn't a real Rosh Hashanah. Number 2, v'taimnim ba'atza. And they could do a hatamana, they could hide something, they could store the fruit ba'atza inside a bean plant. And as much as when we hear hatamana, we think, Hilchos Shabbos, we're going to see it has nothing to do with Hilchos Shabbos, although Rabbeinu Chananel does as a gears about Shabbos, but the pashtas we will see is not. Number 3, you're allowed to dry yourself with a towel on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, let's figure out these 3 dinim. Number 1, Malamayim Gezutra b'Shabbos, Hadamar, and that's what we said. Number 2, V'taimnim ba'atz, you let to store your fruit inside the ha'atza, inside this bean plant. Mahi, what's that din? Tani, we learned in the Brisa. Hishkim lavi p'soiles, you wake up early, and you want to go collect the p'soiles, collect all the refuse from the field. And what are you going to do with this p'soiles? That's what you use to store the fruit. It's a good, like Rashi says, it keeps it moist, it keeps it fresh. So now we want to know, why did you wake up early? What's the reason? In Bishvil, if the reason is Sheish Lav Tal, early in the morning, all the extra stuff that you didn't collect yesterday has dew on it. It fell in the morning. So if it's because it has dew, Hareu B'chayutan, then what's it called? That's called that you purposely went out early to get this stuff while it is wet. What's the halacha with regard to Makabel Toma? Halacha we've seen many times in Gemara and Shabbos that something is only Makabel Toma when it gets wet and the owner wants it to get wet. The owner wants it to be wet. So if you specifically went out early in the morning to get these extra stuff in the field while it is still wet, then it'll be makabel tama. However, if you did it just because you don't want to waste time, you want to get out early to collect the stuff so you don't have to do it later in the day, then it's not Makabel Toma. What does this have to do with Anshe Tveria? Explains the Gemara. Ustam, moving along to Peitas, Peichasam and Aleph, I'm sorry. Ustam Anshe Tveria, the regular people Anshe Tveria, were Kimish Le'yavatam Dami. They were people who worked hard. Therefore, we always assume that the reason why they went out was just to save time, not because they wanted it to be wet. And therefore, says the Gemara, the Anshe Tveria, it will not be Makabel Toma. So that was the second din Rav Chananya ben Akavya was make of an Anshe Tveria. Din number 3, who was talking about luntis, you could dry yourself with a towel. Mahi, what's the din about a towel? The Tani went to the Brisa. You let it dry yourself with a towel and put it on the window. However, don't give it to the bathhouse attendants. We know there were many geziras that they made because the bathhouse attendants didn't listen. They would stoke the fires. What else would they do? They would take the towels, they would wring them out. Slita, they would wring it out in order that it should be dry for the next person. Says the Gemara, because they are chashid, we suspect they can be over this isser, and that's the reason why you should not give the towel to the bathhouse attendants. And Rav Shimon, you could bring the towel. You could bring the towel home. So this was the third kula that he said that you let it dry yourself with a towel. We know that Bizman Hazeh we are machmir at some level to dry with a towel. We know that. We know to dry your hair, for example, we don't do because of Schita Seir, and there's different reasons why you wouldn't dry with a towel. When we learn Gemara and Shabbos, we spoke about that extensively. There's always 2 reasons not to get a towel wet. One is you might come to wring it out. Other is because of cleaning the towel. And actually, Mir Hashem, we're going to be putting up a share about Schita Seir, which has to do with bottle brushes and toothbrushes, which is the first cousin to this sugya over here about drying things with towel. Just to mention one datalach l'mais, the Shmir Shabbos speaks out, but to dry dishes with a towel, that's for sure going to be okay, because what's going to happen when your dish towel gets very wet? You're just going to throw it out. Not throw it out. You're just going to put it in the washing machine and take a new towel. You're not going to actually go wring it out, so we're not concerned. But anyways, let's continue in our Gemara, 6 lines down. Amar Rab Rav Huna, back into our Gemara. This whole din is only to fill up water. You're on this gezutra, you're on this platform, you're on this porch over the water. You let only fill up the water. To pour the water back in, that is forbidden. How is this any different than the case of the uka, the case of the cesspool, the case of the garbage, the case of the extra water main sewer thing, sewage pit, which is going to be the next mission in a few minutes? How is this any different? Because over there we said you are allowed to spill out the water, which we'll see in the bottom Mishnah, but basically it's going to be a case that you're allowed to spill out the water on Shabbos. Why are you allowed to spill out the water? We see here you're not allowed to spill out the water. Says the Gemara, honey taimi, honey loy taimi. Over there you spill out the water and it sits there. It collects there, and therefore there's no potential isser. But in our case, when you're spilling it into the water, what happens when you pour water into water? It spreads out, and therefore that's going to be the potential isser, that you're pouring water from your Rosh Hashanah into the water, which is a caramelist, and then it's going to spread out all along, and therefore you cannot do it. And again, that will become more clear in Mir Hashem at the bottom of the Amid when we speak about this uka, when we speak about this cesspool. Says the Gemara, that was the first girsa. The exact opposite. Don't say that our Mishnah says you're allowed to fill up the water, that's mutter, but to spill out the water is usher. Don't say that. It's mutter to also spill it out. How do we know that? Says the Gemara, of course. Hainuka. That's going to be the next Mishnah. That's going to be the cesspool. We see over there, you let us spill out your water. So what's the chiddush? Says the Gemara, you would think maybe in our case, it doesn't sit there, it spreads out, whereas in the next Mishnah, it does sit there. Kamash Milan, it's mutter in our case also. And again, we will see this more in a few minutes when we get to the Mishnah. Says the Gemara further, 2 dots, about 12 lines down. Says the Gemara, Ravuna Marav, a din that we've seen many times. That this din is only when the two porches are close by. But if they're further away from each other, then the top one is mutter. Why is the top one mutter? Because then the bottom one has nothing to do with the top one. It's a separate entity. So the top one has these machitas. It can fill up the water from the well, from the water underneath. And the bottom one cannot. Rav goes according to his reasoning, the Marav, the bottom guy cannot answer on the top guy his usage through the airspace. As you see here in this picture, the bottom guy, how does he use the top guy's hole? He takes his pail, he has to throw it in. That's called usage in airspace, something that we saw 2 days ago. Says Rav, you cannot answer through the usage of the airspace, and that's the reason why the top guy will still be permitted. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Chia, Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Chia, Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rav Oshia. Yesh Gezel b'Shabbos. New din. Okay, we finished with our water. Let's get back to Eruvin Chatziris. Says Rav Oshia, Yesh Gezel b'Shabbos. This is a din of Gezel b'Shabbos. What exactly does that mean? So Rashi explains that the case here is, we know this thing called a chorva. There's a rune, a picture we've seen many times. And let's say I have my house, and next to my house, this is broken down, dilapidated hut. So I go in, I don't ask the owner permission, I go in and I use it. Says the Gemara, Yesh Gezel b'Shabbos. My usage, even though it was without permission, so in a way it was stealing, my usage makes it that I have somewhat of an ownership inside that destroyed building. And when Shabbos becomes, for Eruv Chatziros, I'm going to be considered an owner. And of course, if I don't participate in the Eruv, it's going to mess it up. Then they continue and they say a second statement. V'chorva machzor lebalim. And in the case of the chorva, in the case of a broken down hut, if you go and you live there without permission, when Shabbos comes, machzor lebalim, it goes back to the owner. So people are bothered. It sounded very, very interesting. Says Gemara, Hakuvakasha. What he just said was a stira. You started off by telling me that there is a din of Gezel b'Shabbos. You started off by telling me that if you're living in that hut, it's called an ownership, and therefore when Shabbos begins, what happens? You have to participate in the Eruv. Alma, Kanya, we see you made a kinyan there. But then you told me that the din of a chorva goes back to the owner. Alma loy kanya. So we see you didn't make a kinyan. We see when Shabbos comes, it goes back to the original owner, and you don't have to be involved in the Eruv. What's going on over here? Says the Gemara. This is what's going on. Yesh din Gezel b'Shabbos Keitzad. It's all one statement. What does it mean that it's din of Gezel of stealing? The chorva machzor lebalim. It means you stole. You didn't get permission. When Shabbos comes, it's not yours. It's the original owners, and therefore what? What's the practical ramification? Therefore, you're not the one that has to be involved in the Eruv, but the owner is the one that has to. Amar Rabbu Masvina Shmeitim, we ask the following question. And this is obviously what brought it down over here. You have one porch on top of the other one. If you're going to tell me that there's a concept of stealing, that you did not have permission to use the other guy's porch, and therefore when Shabbos comes, you're not part of it, it goes back to him. Amaya Surais. Again, back in this picture, the bottom guy, did he have permission to use the top guy's hole? No. He went and did it on his own. So Gemara's assuming now, Yesh Gazel b'Shabbos. So what should happen when Shabbos comes? It should go back to the top guy. So why do I ask her on him? We said Rav holds because you're going to ask her Derech Avir, the airspace is going to ask her, not going to ask her. Says Gemara, what's going on? You never permission. Rav Sheshes, no. What's the king? That top b'chitza, we both made it together. Says Gemara, and therefore that's why it answers. If that's true, then even when I, the bottom one, made my own partition, it should still forbid it. Why should it still forbid it? I'm sorry. It should still forbid it because we still have both of a partnership in the top, and therefore I should answer you. Says Gemara, no, because the guys will be Shabbos. Says Gemara, no. When I go first, when I was partners with you in the top, I quote unquote stole the top, and therefore I should ask you. But then when I subsequently go, and I make my own partition on the bottom, I show that I don't want the partition on the top, I only want the partition on the bottom, and that is the reason why I'm going to answer I will not ask your usage because I am in my own place in the bottom once I have my partition on the bottom. And that's why the Mishnah said that if we each have our own partitions, I do not answer for you. Says the Mishnah. Chatzar, shibachusa, me'arba amos. New case, you have a chatzar, you have a courtyard in front of your house, front yard, that's less than 4 amos. What is halacha? You're not allowed to pour out your water into your chatzar onto the floor on Shabbos. Elim kain. I say uka. That was the uka we started talking about before. Unless you make this cesspool. If you make a cesspool, which is what? Machzekes asayim, which holds 2 sa, minanekev ulamata, from the hole and downward. Beimi bachot, beimi ifneim, whether you make the cesspool inside your chatzar or outside your chatzar, sort of a drainage pipe of some sort, as we'll see, then it is mutter. And we're going to have to explain why. If you make it on the inside of the chatzar or the outside of the chatzar, ella, shami bachot, if you make it on the outside of the chatzar, sarich likmar, you need to put a cover on it. If you put it on the inside, you don't have to put a cover on it. Why do you need a cover? So either you need a cover because then it looks like it's more open, or you need a cover because if it's open and it's outside your chutzner, what's going to happen? It's going to fill up with debris. The debris, it's going to get filled up with garbage. But then it's no longer going to be a 3 tefachol. That is the din. Let's see a picture before we continue the Mishnah. Here you see your front yard. Here you see your chutzner. If it's less than 4 amos, says the Gemara, you have to make this uka. You got to make this cesspool, as you see over there in the corner. Basically an area, and that's where you're going to pour your water into. Here's a picture where you make the uka, the cesspool, outside of your chutzner. And here you see over here that it has to actually have a cover. And here you see him pouring it in, which we'll see in a moment. Says the Mishnah further, Rav Yosef and Yaakov Aimer. Piv, that was the last picture. Piv, if you have this drainage pipe, shu kamer, that is covered up, arba amis b'shus rabim, and it's 4 amis b'shus rabim, shayv cheneteicha me'im Shabbos, then you're allowed to pour your water into it on Shabbos. Again, that was this picture over here. That once that cesspool, that pit, is 4 amos by 4 amos to the cover, then you can pour into it on Shabbos. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, no, they argue. Afilu gag chatzar meya amo, you can have this huge hole. Lo yishbach abiyabiv, you're never allowed to pour directly into that cesspool, into that drainage pipe that's in Rishus Rabim on Shabbos. Avol, what are you allowed to do? Shayvichu legag. You're allowed to pour your water up onto your roof, and then what's going to happen? Then it's going to fall down. The water will on its own go into the drainage pipe. It says the Mishnah to conclude, if you have a chutzner pavilion in front of your house, they combine to be 4 amos for this thing that we're discussing in the first part of the Mishnah. That said that when it's less than 4 amos, you can't pour into it. If it's 4 amos, you could. If you have 2 porches, 2 elevated areas, let's say one side of these 2 porches made the cesspool. The one that made the cesspool is allowed to use it. The other one is not. This is the picture of the chutzner and the achsadra. Chsadra is more of just like this open area. We see that it's mitzdarf and it combines to the requisite size of 4 amos. Here you have your shtei didiyos, your 2 elevated areas, and as you see, the one on the right side, that house made the cesspool. Said the Mishnah, only the ones on the right side can pour the water into it, not the ones on the left side. Says the Gemara, my time, what is the reason of this din? You restarted off the Mishnah, we said we have a chutzner less than 4 amos, you can't pour water into it. Why not? What's the problem pouring water into my chutzner when it's less than 4 amos? 2 answers. Amar Rabba says, you use 2 sa of water every single day. Be'arba amos, when your chutzner is 4 amos big, Adam writes the zalfan. When you have a 4 amma wide chutzner, a larger chutzner, then what do you want to do? You want to do ziluf. You're going to want to sprinkle water on it, which settles the dust. It cleans the chutzner. So you have a 4 amos. The Ritva says because 4 amos is an area that is chashiv. You have a big chutzner, then you want to pour your water on it to keep it nice and clean. But if it's less than 4 amos, then you don't want to pour your water on it, and that's why the Mishnah said you would not be allowed to pour the water into the chatzar. Moving along to Bechasim and Beis, Paches Midalit, Shoivchen. Less than 4 amos, you're allowed to pour it in. Less than 4 amos, Shoivchen, Idavid Uka, Shari. If you made the cesspool, then you're allowed to pour in. Eloi Aser. Again, if it's larger than 4 amos, then you want to put zilu. If you want to sprinkle the water, it's going to be fine. If it's less than 4 amos, it's only going to be allowed in order to throw out your sheivchen, your garbage water, is if you made the cesspool. If not, it's not allowed. That is the Rabba's teretz to explain the Mishnah. Rav Zira Amar a different teretz. Dalit amos taimi. This is similar to what we saw in Amud Aleph. Says Rav Zera, if there is 4 amos, then you know what happens when you pour water into it? It gets absorbed into the ground and it stays right there. So you're not considered to be transporting and moving items, Rishuyos and Shabbos. But if it's less than 4 amos, what happens when you pour water in there? It's going to overflow and go into the street, and therefore is not allowed. Says the Gemara, what's the difference these two terutzim? Amar Abaye, Orech v'kotin ikaminayu. Says Abaye, that a case like this, when it's long and narrow, that's going to be the difference. According to Rav Zera, that it's a din in absorbing, so he goes by area. So this is the same area as 4 by 4, 16 square amos. So this will also absorb the water and is allowed. According to Rabbah, no, had to do with 4 by 4, because that's a square area, that's a chashav area, that's an area that you do zilov, and therefore that's the reason why it would be allowed. But when it's arach v'katan, long and narrow, 8 by 2, it would not be allowed. Says the Gemara, now we're going to go through a bunch of different proofs potentially to Rabbah and Rav Zera. Again, Rav Zera was the second opinion that said it has to do with the water getting absorbed, and therefore he allows it by square area. He doesn't need an actual 4 by 4 as long as it's 16 square amos. Whereas Rabbah says no, it has to do with 4 by 4, an area that is chashiv, an area that you're going to do zilaf on it. Says the Gemara 4 lines down to 9, we learn to the Mishnah. Chatzar v'achsadra mitzaref from the Dalet amos. Case in our Mishnah that the chatzar and the achsadra, the open area, these two areas combine to be considered 4 amos with regard to this din. Says the Gemara, I understand according to Rav Zera that it's all a din of absorption. Nicha, then it's great. You have an achsadra, an open area, you have a chatzar, an open area, the two combine, and now you have area to absorb your water. But according to Rabbah, it had nothing to do with that. According to Rabbah, it had to do with the chashiv area. This is not chashiv, so kasha. No, which was really the picture that we showed originally. I think we actually have 2 pictures over here. This is, here you go. This is your achsadra when it's not right next to it. So according to Rav Zera, but it still has a square area of 16 amos. So it's okay. According to Rav, this is not chashiv. It's a part here, it's a part there. So you're not going to do ziluf there. You're not going to want to sprinkle on the water over here. So according to Rav, why is it okay? And the Gemara answers no. If the case is really like this, then really they line up evenly, and therefore it is a 4 by 4 square. So that's why it works, even according to Rabbah. Tashamas, we try again. Now this brisa says that if the chutzner is not 4 by 4, a square, can't pour water into the Shabbos. So what we understand where this is going. According to Rabbah makes sense. Why not? It's not 4 by 4. What is it? It's like 8 by 2. It's like the previous case. It's not exactly a square. So according to Rabbah, I understand why you can't pour water. Because Rabbah only allowed it when it's actually 4 by 4, a square, a chashiv. That you do ziluf, that you sprinkle the water on it, then it would be okay. But not in this case. El Rav Zera kasha. What do we do according to Rav Zera? This brisa that says you will not be allowed to pour the water when it's not 4 by 4 is the opinion of Rabbanan in the Mishnah. If you remember, that said that when you have this biv, when you have this whole Rabbim, even if it's 100 amos, you can't pour into it. So it says Rav Zera, this brisa is also the Rabbanan. Umasnisan is Rav Elazar ben Yankivi, and the Mishnah is Rav Elazar ben Yaakov, who goes with the absorption svara. Why did Rav Zera push our Mishnah to be going with Elazar ben Yaakov and go with absorption? Because Rav Zera had an issue inherently in the Mishnah. Why did the Mishnah say a wording of pechusa, which sounds like area? sounds like it's lacking in the totality of the area. Why didn't it say a square that's not 4 by 4? Elalav, you know why? Shmaim ben Abdullah ben Yaakov. Rav Zera said it must be, it's going with the opinion of Abdullah ben Yaakov, which is further in the Mishnah, which has to do with absorption. And that's where Rav Zera gets his whole Shita, Shema Mina, and that's Rav Zera proves his point. Says Gemara, 1 second. The next case in the Mishnah said, Rav ben Yaakov previously showing us that the previous case, was not Rav ben Yaakov. Answers the Gemara. No, you got it all wrong. Really, the entire Mishnah is Rav ben Yaakov as follows. If you have a chatzar which is less than 4 amos, then you can't pour water into it on Shabbos. Let's say it is 4 amos, you can pour it in. Why are you allowed to pour it in when it is 4 amos? Rav ben Yaakov is of the opinion that when you have this covered up pit, then you're allowed to pour up water into the Shabbos. Why? Because it absorbs in. And that is the end of the first part of the Mishnah. And we continue. Rav ben Yaakov, a big of a comment. Really, we have 2 dots here. Really, the Gemara flows because we're continuing discussing this covered drainage pipe. Says the Gemara, Masnisan deloy kechananya. The Mishnah is not like Chananya. Who's Chananya? The Tanya Chananya Omer Afilu Gag Mea Ama. Even if you have a roof 100 amas, lo yishbach, you're not allowed to pour it onto the roof. Lefi sha'ein agag asid avlaya, because the roof doesn't absorb. Ella likalech. You pour something on the roof, what's going to happen? It's going to spill down onto the floor. It's going to spill into the drainage pit. So Chananya is even more machmer than the Chachamim. We saw that the Chachamim in the Mishnah said, don't pour it straight into the pit, but pour it onto the roof, and then it will fall down. Says Chananya, no, you can't even pour it onto the roof. Says the Gemara, fine. So the Mishnah is like Chananya. Tani, we learned. Okay, new brisa says this whole din about pouring your water out in your chutzner. This whole din, and now we're going to be able to see a little more of this understanding. Says the Gemara, it's only be Mosachama in the summer, but in the winter, pour as much as you want. Says the Gemara, my time, but what's the reason? In the winter, the water is all rainy and disgusting. Everyone here in Yerushalayim understands this. It's raining now. The floors are all muddy. So when you pour water now onto the ground, which is muddy, where do you want that water to go? Right there in the ground. It's already all muddy and disgusting. Let it absorb right there. And therefore, there's no concern that it might run out elsewhere because it's not your kavanah. What's your kavanah? To pour it here. So that's the reason why it's going to be mutter. Amalei Abayi says Abayi 1 second. In the case of Shayvchen in the Mishnah, when you have this drainage water, you also don't want it to run all the way out. And yet the Mishnah says don't do it. Amarle, no. What's the reason? What's the concern in our case? Why are we being naked in Imosek Shaman? Imisham Kilkul, what are you worried about? You're going to ruin the street? Kilkul Chatzeiroi, Hamakal Glivakaime, your chutzner is already all full of water, so we're not worried about that. Imisham Gezeira, and if we're worried at Gezeira that it might look like something else, Shema Yaimu, people might say, people might say, that guy's pipe is spitting out water on Shabbos. Stam Sinois Mekalchanim. When in the winter, pipes are spitting water everywhere, so it is not a problem. Amar Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman continues in the same train of thought. In the summer, if you have an uka cesspool that holds 2 saws of liquid, put in 2 saws of liquid. Nicely the same. Machzik saw, again, we're in the winter. If it only holds 1 saw, nicely saw, you keep it putting a saw. But we're more machmir for the same reason that we just said a moment ago, which Amar is going to explain. Machzik sayim, if this pit holds 2 saw, nicely sayim, put in 2 saw. Saw ain't nice like a liquor, but if it only holds 1 saw, you're not allowed to use that pit. Because in the summer, we're more machmir. We only allow you to use it if it holds a full 2 saw. Says the Gemara explaining, I don't understand. In the summer, if it holds 1 saw, at least be allowed to put in 1 saw in there. Says the Gemara, no, we're afraid you're going to put in too much. And what happens if you have a pit that holds 1 saw? It's like you have a cup that holds 8 ounces, you pour in 16 ounces. What happens? It flies all over the place. So when you fill up this pit with more liquid, what are you doing? You are making it run out into the street. No longer can you say, I just wanted it to absorb right here. What are you talking about? You put in too much liquid, it's running everywhere. You knew that was going to happen. That's the reason why it's usher. Says Gemara 1 second. Why don't we make the same gzeir in the winter? You're going to pour in too much water, it's going to go run everywhere. Says Gemara, why The same answer. What are you worried about? You're going to put in water, it's going to ruin your chutzner? It's already all ruined from the rain. They're going to think you're spilling out water. And everyone's pipes are spitting out water, so there is no concern. Says Abai, even 1 core or 2 core, it is not a problem. And again, so now we learned a little bit more the difference between the winter when it's all rainy and muddy. Therefore, when you pour something there, you want it to stay there. Whereas in the summer, the exact opposite. In the summer, it's not all rainy and muddy, and therefore it's going to be more machmir. And now we have two platforms, one opposite the other. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava, Filu Ervu. Rava says, even if they made an Eruv, I'm sorry, let's pull up that picture one more time. Here's your 2 diutas, your 2 porches, and we said when you have one cesspool on the right side over here, only those people can use it, not the people on the left side. Comes along Rava. Rava says this thing is even if these 2 people, these 2 porches made one big Eruv, still you're not allowed to use your neighbor's cesspool. You can carry things in this chutzner, but you can't pour the water down into the cesspool. Explains the Gemara. What's the reason? If you're saying because it's too much water, but we learned whether you have a cesspool, whether you have this vessel, whether you have a fish pond, whether you have a boat, even though it's already filled up with water, Erev Shabbos, still you allowed to put more water into it on Shabbos. It's all a water area, and we're not afraid you're going to put too much in. Ella, as we see in Rashi, actually, you see Rashi over here on the bottom. Rashi says, so we're not worried it's going to be too much water. Says the Gemara, says the Gemara, you know what we're worried about? What we're worried about is Amar Rava, moving along to Beitazim and Aleph, closing out the wonderful perek, the exact opposite. If you made an Erev, you could use your neighbor's cesspool. Says Marv, if you didn't make an Erev, why not? A new gezerah. You know why? Because you're in your chutzner. If you don't make an Erev and you start pouring your water into there, you might come bring out a keli from inside your house to there. That which is in the chutzner, you're allowed to pick up and pour it into there. But we're afraid if we allow you to use the cesspool, you know what you're going to do? You're going to go into your house, pick up a bucket of water, and carry it down, and therefore be over. And that's the gzeir. That's why we don't let you use your neighbor's cesspool if you did not make an Erev. But if you made an Erev, then you're yes allowed to. What a wonderful parak. We shall return to this 8th parak. And now we begin the 9th parak, Daf Peitas, closing in under 3 weeks. Parak called Gagois. Called Gagois, the Rishos Echad. All the roofs of the city are one Rishos Buvachli, Gagavaya Yoda, Namach Divir Amer. It should sound familiar from Gemara and Shabbos. 3 opinions: Rishim Gamliel, Chachamim, Rameir. We'll do the Mishnah one more time tomorrow. Mazel tov, many more prakim we shall learn together.